All right. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this is April 2026's OBT reading group session, where today we're going to be looking at developing quality assurance practices and moving oral translations to print. And we are so excited that we have both of the authors here with us today. So I know this is going to be a good conversation. Um, just want to say welcome to everybody, and I'm excited. As we've mentioned in the past, for some, this might be your first time, so I just want to mention. So this is meant to be a time to look at different topics, different papers, articles, books, chapters, essays related to the topic of oral Bible translation so that we can talk about them and process them together as a group. So that's one part of it. But the other part is that we want to grow our relationships as a community so that we can get to know each other. So if you don't know somebody on the call, make sure you reach out to them and get to know them. So we have JL who's joining us. And she is a seminary student, and I'm just excited to see her getting involved in this space. And so I hope that everybody will have a chance to say hello to her. Um, so without further ado, let's go ahead and start. I will put it out there and let somebody else throw their opening question out to Swapna and Robin. Or if you don't have a question, even just a comment or anything that you'd like to bring out as we look at this text.
Can I have a question or a comment?
Sure.
This is something, the whole idea is something that um, Janet and I've been thinking about for a long time, just haven't, uh, never had any opportunity to do anything with because our involvement with uh, OBS or Oral Bible storytelling is kind of limited to a project.
Mhm.
Um, but when Seed Company asks year-end reviews, what would you like to do? That was a constant thing. Like, do some research in going from spoken to written. Uh, a number of our, and the reason is a number of our projects had uh, learned the whole book of Ruth, and then afterwards, they told the entire book, and it was consultant checked, and so we thought, wow, it's consultant checked. Now what? Can it be published? Either audio or written form, and so they chose to do written publications, but we were never in on what actually happened, to the in taking it from storytelling to written. That would have been nice to be part of. Um, but so I'm really glad that you all are doing this research. I just had a few things. I see there are linguists that are involved in the research. Um, are there any literacy people that are involved in the, because literacy people have a slightly different skill set than linguists do or translators do. I mean, if orthographies were as simple as a linguistic um, study, no, we'd be, everybody would. It'd be a lot easier, put it that way. But because of political things, community preferences, conventions, spelling conventions that are already in place with other languages, they all factor into the how and word breaks, all that kind of stuff, morphophonemics. So there's just asking: are there any literacy people involved in your project?
I like how you break it down as if it were just linguistics, it'd be easy and everybody would do it.
That is that is so true, Jim. I agree. If it was always like, one phoneme to one symbol, it would have been so easy. Like, we just have a phonemic analysis. Yes, and we acknowledge that there are sociolinguistic factors involved. And, in the older Bible translation paradigm, we were all packaged into one. So we did not have a literacy consultant involved in the whole thing, but at least for the projects that I worked with, I used my experience going from a phonemic analysis into developing an orthography, testing it in the field for the project that I worked with in the past in the written translation realm, and having helped other teams do their phonemic analysis and come up with an orthography and test it. Because you rightly pointed out that there is a lot of factors involved. It is just not linguistics. It would have been so easy, like math, A is equal to B, and that's it. No, that is not it in literacy. So we did at least, for the projects that I worked with, we did extensive testing with the community to see that this is accepted and this is a well-received one. And we also did consider the language of wider communication factor in testing the orthography. So that is all I can say. Robin, if you would like to add something to it.
Sure, thanks, Swapna. Yeah, so the projects that we reported on, other than the two that Swapna worked on, the other two were worked on and we observed them. We weren't there for them.
Yeah.
I should say we observed the case studies. Let me put it that way. And then reported on that. I did work on additional projects with Seed Company recently. And so on all of those projects, the orthography development was done prior to transcription. So that was one of the criteria that we looked for projects, was that they had already done orthography development with consultants that specialize in orthography development. And so that was a criteria, but we weren't involved. I wasn't specifically involved with that piece of it. So when we put out feelers for, projects that might work for a case study, that was one of the requirements, was that they had a developed orthography. Some of them reported on how orthography was, how it factored into their oral to print process, and specifically, there were some cases where, for example, one of the studies we didn't include in the project, one that was Tobias's, and that's because he wrote separately on his. So we just let him, he could do a much better job reporting on that. But he talked about how orthography they made decisions and then they had to go back and test it. And when they tested it, the community didn't accept all of the orthography. So they had to go back and make some changes. So I will say in his report, he talks about that. And also in the Seed Company report, we touch a little bit on it. But that was one of the criteria. We just weren't specifically involved with that piece of it. I hope that answers that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, that's good.
And as the title of the article suggests, this is developing quality assurance practices. So, that's a good comment, Jim, that as we're moving forward and as we're doing more of this kind of stuff, we can look to include that, look to have orthography specialists involved in those projects as we go.
Yeah, and may I quickly add one comment? Even for the couple of projects that I worked on, we did get SIL to develop the orthography. So for me, it is a no-brainer. It shouldn't, I have heard comments in the past that, oh, they will just write. It doesn't happen that way. It will take probably centuries then to crystallize the orthography. So we did get expert help even for the projects. But as I said, I was involved mostly in testing it, but just to make sure that it works and is accepted. So yeah, I'm sure Robin agrees, we very much would like professionally developed orthographies, unless it has been used in the past by the language.
And it looks like Tobias has just joined the call, so he missed that, but we can loop him back in a minute. Um, so while we're thinking, I had something I highlighted on the first page, page 123. It's the second paragraph. Uh, the implication then is that the purpose or intended use of the print version must drive the process and determine the product. I'd love to hear more about what all that means and if you could unpack that a little bit for us.
Sure. So when we were looking at projects and we observed some, I went to South Africa and observed some of the projects that they were working on there, and they did a training. It was a contrived training, right? So they were kind of a taste and see thing for a lot of people, and so I don't know how closely what they were doing reflected their practices on the field. I asked people, I did some interviews, walked around and observed a lot of the groups that were working, talked with some of their practitioners with Wycliffe South Africa. Um, and I found that, the process was quite different than what I had imagined that it would be in some ways. So they were they were very much so Bonifacio was doing the consulting and he was doing this for the whole group. So everybody could see this is what a consultant session looks like for me. And so he had the team there and they had the audio and they had the print was projected on a screen and they were going through it line by line and they were looking for consistency. And I mean, they wanted it to be exact, word for word, the same. So they would decide if there was a discrepancy, they would decide either we like the way it is in print or we prefer the way it is in audio. And they would make a decision. And whatever they decided, they changed it on the spot. And so the two were always the same. And so I was a bit surprised by that. And in talking with Bonifacio, he said, our teams, our language communities, they want them to be identical so that, so I asked them, tell me more about that. And he was saying that their goal was that they could read and listen at the same time. And if they do that, they want it to match word for word. They made the decision that they would keep the oral features in the print. So they didn't remove things that you might expect onomatopoeia or some things, little, oral features, markers that you would expect might not be in the print, but they thought this is really important because we really care about how it sounds. So they were only adding punctuation, capitalization, really formatting was the only way that they differed. So that had me thinking about, well, what about readability? And I started, really thinking about that. What if the communities don't want, these are really largely oral communities, and there was a lot of discussion about the reasons they wanted it. And they didn't necessarily, they might use it for literacy development. That was one of their thoughts. And so that's different from a language community where there's already a literate demographic that wants to read scripture. And so, so that triggered our thinking in this way of, well, someone else might do it differently because they have different reasons for wanting to have it in print. So there was a lot of focus at this conference or this taste and see on status and validation of languages by having something in print. And it wasn't the same value maybe for some of the other language groups that we were looking at, observing and talking to, where they were saying, well, we have readers and they want to read. And so the question is, would they be different? And in our research, I think we found that there's a whole lot of reasons, and then that people want the print. So if they want it for different reasons, what's the intended use? And I think that would be different then. So not everybody wants it word for word exactly. Some language communities want it to be more readable, and we gave them freedom in some of our studies to just make whatever changes they felt were necessary. And in almost every case, they made changes. The changes varied from language project to language project, but in almost every case, they made changes. Some made a lot of changes. Some made just a few changes. Maybe they made one change, but they made it consistently. So that's just something that we ran across in our studies. It was sort of a hypothesis at the time of this article, but we've done a little bit more research, and that research is confirming this to be the case. So there's still a lot more to be seen, but this is what we found so far. Swapna, if you want to add something to that, feel free.
No, you answered very well.
Yeah, Janet.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the work and documenting this. And I got right from the start that this is provoking a conversation and that we have a lot more to study. And even your comments that you just made, Robin, which are insightful, it causes you to think, even as you're deciding, a group is deciding on one of these varieties or ranges of reasons for wanting the print and doing some kind of public telling while those are doing private reading. And so it has to really match. And if that's the case of developing literacy fluency, will that printed version be dated fairly quickly as a group gets
Right.
It's just pondering. I mean, it brings your paper brought up a lot of musings, but one of the things that I really liked was the paragraph that you wrote about. It starts as mentioned, an audio recording of print translation is considered the same as a text. However, the distant differences between the two are evident, and I thought that paragraph was a great set of key questions that we should be talking about. Do we go back to ambiguous in the print that you have to make a decision about in terms of emotion? And as you mentioned, Robin, the onomatopoeia or the exclamations, as we call it in some places, or even just some of the politenesses of dialogue that you do. It's just like automatic that you put in an address as you start a dialogue. People can't help but do that in the oral, but not necessarily needing it in print because of quotation marks or the he said kind of thing. Those kinds of things that mark a difference between the oral and the print. But what I didn't see is recommendations, and I wondered, recommendations around these questions in the final. And I just wondered if you had some examples or some, what are people in these projects doing around those kinds of differences that, or is it still the unknown?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was just thinking of an example while you were talking, and then I noticed that Daniel Green is here. He worked on a project in his language. It was one of these studies that we did with Seed Company, and then Swapna also has worked on projects, and Tobias is here. So all of you feel free to jump in. I will talk and give you a chance to think about some examples. So in the 4 pilot projects that we did with Seed Company, there was an example that we got from a project from the Bible Society of Uganda. It was in a passage in Luke when Jesus was speaking, and they decided when they went to print to say, Jesus said in a sorrowful tone, or Jesus sounded really sorrowful, or something about that, about his emotion. They included it in print. There's an example. That's a question. That's a decision. You don't have to actually do that. Yeah. So they talked about it. They decided they would do that. There are lots and lots of examples like that to decide, well, why would we include Jesus's tone if it's not in the original? Or, so should we? What are the benefits? What are the downsides? And so there are lots and lots of little decisions like that to be made.
Sorry to jump in, but and maybe Daniel can answer if he's the one, but we're talking about these quality assurance measures, and that to me is part of it. What are the criteria that they used? Did they have certain criteria, or was it kind of peer decision? Any insights?
That's a great question, and this wasn't Daniel's project, but he can speak to his project if he has any thoughts. I will just say this: I think one of the things that happens is that the team has done the work of emotion exegesis. They've done that work, and they have some answers. They have some solutions, right, that they've come up with. And so I think my instinct would be that they don't want those solutions to go to waste. And so they're including the work that they've already done as a part of OBT. But that's an assumption. I can't say that I was told that. That's an assumption, but I would love to hear from some of the others.
I will just say that one of the things that we've had to do in our projects, as Jim said, we've kind of talked a lot about this quality assurance. We have added sort of a layer of quality assurance on impact beyond meaning. What does it mean? How does it work?
Yeah.
To cover some of that, the wisdom that is gained by doing performance,
right?
Giving us insight into what's probable, because we're not there and it's a different context, but most probable in those abstract areas: motivation, attention, emotion, and have had felt the need to sort of even complicate the quality assurance even more by talking impact. Anyway, I'd be curious to know what you all are thinking in that area.
Sure, and that would be is a major way. It's a very obvious way to see the difference between an oral to print product and a written translation product.
Yeah,
so I don't know if okay, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say if anybody wants to talk to that, please do.
When we were doing this paper and when we were doing the research, the phrase that always came to my mind is, "Oh, it is reduced to writing." And I'm like, we do reduce a lot of things when we write things down. And this emotion and impact is one of those things. But I completely agree with what Robin said. It is a decision of the team, what they want to do with the emotion exegesis that they have done and the findings that they have. And a lot of times it is just bringing the ambiguity back into the text, because people really don't feel comfortable, like Robin rightly pointed out, that, oh, this is not in the text, then why would we add this? And this is also a criticism that I have received about OBT, that we do make these decisions for the reader. If it is a reader, he has that freedom to read it the way he wants to read it, and give the emotion that, and they can do it. Each individual reader can do that. And in OBT, we take that freedom away and then we make a decision for the listener. So in the projects that I worked, it was just the ambiguity was brought back in because there were no adjectives or adverbs added to the text to nail the emotion down. Tobias, are you here? Oh, you are. Oh, yes. Yeah, Heather has a good point too, that some aspects of prosody are captured in punctuation. Thanks, Heather. That's true.
So on this topic, sorry, I didn't want to. I was just thinking on this topic, since it's kind of a conversation here, and then Swapna and I have been working on this and talking about this and thinking, and others of you, like Jim and Janet, involved in performance and all of this, it can say, yes, decisions are made in the exegesis and in OBT, some things are made explicit, but the original communicative event was not ambiguous, right? And like somebody said something and they said it a certain way and they meant something when they said it that way. And so we do our best. And maybe when I'm reading it and it's ambiguous and I make decisions, I make the wrong ones. We don't know. As a reader, I might make the wrong ones. Also, as a translator, I might do it differently than the original communicative event. Like all of this is just everybody's doing their best to try to communicate as accurately as possible the intended message. So I just say that sort of as a plug for, or just sort of as an apologetics for, you know, there are reasons and justifications and arguments for all of these different ways of doing it.
Well, and how many times in conversation have we said, "Oh, that's not what I meant"?
Right.
Yeah. Excellent conversation. So in the paragraph just before that, there's a sentence that I highlighted. It says, "They are not in competition, but can be seen to have equal value as the inspired word of God." Um, I agree. You know my position on this. Recently talked about the sufficiency of an oral Bible translation, but my question would be, in practice, is that really happening? Or are they being seen as, well, the written one obviously is more inspired than the oral one? That's a question, not a comment. No takers?
No, I think it's an excellent question. I think those of us who are involved in OBS get to kind of skate around that by being not a fixed product, and allows us to be a little bit safer. Like, we're our source is the printed version, or our source is a fixed version, but we don't have to address that. I think it's an excellent question.
I agree. It is an excellent question, Chris. I I would say that it is too early to answer that question as of now.
Mhm.
So we'll
What a
have to wait
safe
and see.
answer.
Yeah. Yeah, save the answer for a later time. But at least for the projects that I worked with when we began this, if they had said at some point that, oh, this is great, and this gives us validity, this validates translation, then this is more prestigious, this written product, and let's stick with that, or let's continue that, I would have assumed that, yes, it indeed is seen as the more uh, credible Bible. But I did not see that happen. They were like, oh, this is great. We can do this. Let's do this after we complete OBT New Testament, when we have time. Let's now concentrate, because that is where the scripture engagement was more. And I pointed to Word for the World study. That is the only study where they have compared oral and written scripture. And they did that in Uganda in a project called RELI, and they found that scripture engagement wise, and people valued and cherished oral Bible translation in every domain except inside the church. Inside the church, they preferred the written Bible. But I don't know, Chris, over the years how that will perceive. That will, change the perception of the community regarding that. So it will be an interesting thing to wait and see.
Yeah. Well, and
I
I
do
think that,
think Heather and Virginia Peterson are working on a report or a study on use. So I think I would like to see that when that
they
comes
just
out.
presented at the COP this month.
Oh, great. Okay, I
Mhm.
missed that one because I was out of the country.
I missed it
Yeah.
too, but I look forward to watching it.
Let me go find the QR code and I'll drop it in the text
Okay.
for the report itself. It's still a beta version, but
Yeah. I think that though, Swapna, that gets back to the multimodal approach, being holistic in what we do. Going back to the quote about it not being in competition, as a practitioner of OBT, my goal is not to say, oh, hey, look how great oral Bible translation is, so much better than written translation. No, I mean, I think that there are people that will be reached by each modality that may not be reached by the other. And so if we can put as many modalities out there as possible in a project, I think that's better. It can only strengthen and improve the possibility for scripture engagement. It doesn't mean that there will be scripture engagement, but it improves the chances if we have more opportunities and more ways for them to interact with the scripture.
100% agree.
Jim, you
I also
Oh, go ahead.
I agree, and I think that we interact differently with different modalities.
sure.
So, wouldn't we want access for people to have the range as opposed to seeing as in competition or a binary choice, this or this?
Yeah,
Can I just
Agree.
make a comment?
sure.
The Barry Bornman made a presentation to us that I still remember. He was doing an MBA in Australia, and he said there's a different way of seeing competition, understanding competition. It's not that what your intent is necessarily, but if you have two things in the same location vying for people's attention, they are automatically in competition with each other. So whether it's intended or not, the written being in competition with the audio, it's just it is whether it's intended or not. But I don't think we really need to worry about that. I mean, it's kind of like a both and kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, in terms of multimodality, just I think we might be confusing our terms. The written and spoken are more like media, or audio is media. The modality is, there could be several modalities with each format. Just
Yeah,
comment.
I agree, Jim. This term is a little confusing because initially when we started interacting with this word multimodal translation, we were looking more at performance. There are a lot of things involved, like we have our speech, our tone, our intonation, our gestures, our position, the way there's a visual, there's a whole lot of modalities involved in communication. If you can see, I'm using my hands a lot, but again, is a modality. Yeah, but over the years, it is now more referring to medium, like print, written, video, audio kind of uh, meaning. So every time this word comes up, I need to switch my brain to see, okay, what in this context, how is this word used? And we feel it is okay. I did have a conversation about this with Jim.
James Maxey.
Yes, and Eshni White at Phobi, and we decided that, oh yeah, it's okay, it is okay that there is this ambiguities that exist. So
Yeah.
uh,
So speaking of ambiguity, a little bit further down, it is expected that let's see. Sorry, my note is obscuring the word here. But translation process anyway, will include checks by peers, the community, and a qualified consultant. And I'm wondering, how does that fit with CBBT in this paradigm? And I don't know, maybe that wasn't included in the scope of what you were doing in this process. But as we think about developing quality assurance for this moving from oral to print, how would that fit into the paradigm? I'm just stirring up the pot this morning.
oh my, that's
So the word qualified was intended to be ambiguous. So that was just my way of not, when I was thinking about that phrase, I thought, I don't want to offend, right? So Swapna and I were thinking like, well, let the community decide who's qualified. And then so we used the word consultant so we wouldn't lose too many readers, but also we qualified it with the word qualified to say whoever's doing the qualification. So yes, I would say that I will just say that, there's this statement in Phobi, that allows for, I don't remember exactly how it's worded now, but it allows
Equivalent
for,
process or something.
yeah, equivalent process, yeah.
And so you could just substitute the phrase that we used with the phrase that Phobi uses. But yeah, it's a good question to mean like, yes, it doesn't have to be that a consultant is doing it, but whatever the consulting process is or the quality assurance process, which, when you say a quality assurance process, that includes everything from exegesis and drafting to all the things. So yeah. So I'll defer to Phobi on that and say, there are multiple ways, and I think Swapna, you.
I agree. That ambiguity is good in many ways, and it's
The original authors thought so.
yeah, so but thinking about it, I felt that having worked on very involved in was being very involved in this process for the couple of projects, I was thinking it was beneficial for me that I had experience in written Bible translation and consulting on those translations and checking oral translations, because when we transcribe it down, both these words merge, and there is this, we are trying to find the middle ground, a comfortable middle ground between the two modalities. I'm using that medium in the sense of medium Jim now. And so I was very grateful that I personally did that and gained a lot of understanding, because this is a little bit more complex than I would have expected. This is not a very straightforward, let's just transcribe it down. But yes, yeah, that
Which
adds
is
to
why
the qualified.
I'm trying to, sorry, Swapna, I didn't mean to step on you.
No,
I was
no,
just saying that's why we're moving away from just talking about transcription and talking about oral to print. And transcription is a part of it. It's a part of the process. But when you stay there, then it ignores some of the other steps that are involved in the process that are very important to getting to something that's usable, maximally usable by the community.
Janet, you had your hand up.
No, I just wondered, in all your experiences, Swapna and Robin and others, to me, the question comes up, will people consider a consultant check in one media or one set of modalities, or however you want to talk about it, mean that it doesn't require as rigorous, robust, or a translation consultant checking when it's shifted from one to the other. Either way, reduced to writing or yeah, brought out in the oral. And what you two think about that whole possibility, or are you seeing groups already making decisions, and which one? Yeah, what's your opinion or thoughts about this?
Well, I'll say that first thing I want to say is I think it's very interesting that no one requires consultant checks on audio recordings of written translations. I'll just throw that out there and leave it there for um, to answer your question though. I mean, if we're thinking about these things, as being sort of similar processes, that's just a curiosity. But when it goes to print, the print is considered so sacred. And once it goes to print, it's automatically like, oh, it's elevated to status. And we would never consider not having a consultant check on this written on the print piece of it. So in most of the projects that I've been a part of, and this would be Swapna's project also, the consultant is the same on the OBT and on the print. And so that is one of the recommendations because for obvious reasons. I mean, if you've worked really hard on this OBT process and you've done the consulting, you're aware of the changes, you can see it's just a lot easier to come in. There are a lot of things that have to be weighed in, I think, as a consultant. One of the things that is just a curiosity that I haven't resolved in my mind is faithful to what? When we're talking about fidelity and faithfulness, which Tua moves away from that more, but when we're talking about fidelity, so there's this tension between faithful to the original and faithful to the audio recording of this oral product, or this oral process. And so there's some tension there. And I think the consultant who's been involved in the OBT process is probably adapting more naturally to this tension of I've been a part of this. Where someone coming in fresh to this print would say, why are you saying that Jesus is sorrowful? Like that's not, necessary, or it's not there, or it's, I don't know if he was sorrowful, if he sounded sorrowful, so maybe like there's a difference there in how you would consult if you weren't involved in the OBT. But as a general practice, as a recommendation, and this is a recommendation based on what we know so far, it seems wise to say the same consultant should work on both projects. However, it's not always going to work. It's not always going to be feasible. And so what then? And I guess we haven't got there yet for most of the projects. This is pretty new, but yeah.
Well,
Others feel free to.
I think Tobias could talk about that tension a little bit with the loyalty to the source text and loyalty to the audience. Tobias, don't want to put you on the spot, but would love to hear if you have anything to add to that.
Not really anything to add, but just yeah, it is a real tension. Like from our project perspective, like we've kind of had the luxury of me being on site, so a lot of the work that a consultant might do with a transcription written version of the oral, like I can kind of step in and look after. So, but for other projects where a consultant needs to check a written version that's produced by the team, I would recommend having the same person do that if possible. It just seems more efficient to me, apart from anything else.
I agree too.
I have
Austin?
a question. Yeah. Holly made a comment in the chat that I thought was very helpful.
is there an assumption that if someone is trained and certified as a written consultant, that they should automatically be able to check OBT? Um, because in Indonesia, we've encountered situations where we've heard even that other OBT ministries have said, oh, well, this is a written consultant for Cartodaya, so that's good enough for OBT. And so, what's the general feel of everybody? Certified written consultant automatically can check OBT. Let me just throw this little nugget out.
Absolutely. Sorry, I should clarify that was sarcasm. Go ahead, Swapna.
Yeah. So that see, for I can speak for faith comes by hearing. We do look for certified consultants, and we do use consultants who are certified for text translation. But the requirement we put forth is that the consultant attends the project launch workshop to understand orality and see how translation is done. And in a lot of cases that works, but there are still cases where the consultant doesn't really grasp what orality is, and there are times when I go and orient the consultant, and there are times when we just have to move away from that consultant and then say that, okay, we will provide another consultant, because some people just still look for all these small particles and all these suffixes and affixes, and talk about that to an oral translator. It just doesn't work. That's because unless you look at the whole translation holistically and see how it is communicating. And even some of the comments I've heard coming from a very text-oriented translation consultants are difficult to even process by the team. So we have had instances where we have had to move Austin. So to answer your question, they do need more training and orientation as far as what are the differences that is involved in OBT. And for some people, it just not possible for some consultants, but some people just take it to fish to water. That's what you say, so easily into OBT and say, yeah, this is, and especially I've seen those consultants also come from very oral cultures themselves, and they have absolutely no problem moving into written. And then, yeah, I know. Holly, there is an attempt now with the at least Asia area TCDW for SIL. I can vouch that they probably are the first ones in the world to do that with the TCDW. They have included consulting OBT, and they started it a few years ago, and last year onwards, it's a whole another day full of training for OBT. Chris will lead that this year. Thank you, Chris. And we were initially hoping that 4 weeks for TCDW could be extended to 5 weeks with 1 week added in between. But because of COVID and other things, when Theoretica moved to online, we thought adding another day would be probably sufficient, because there is a limit to what you can do online. So there are people out there aware of that. And there's also this new couple of avenues where, Chris, you may want to speak about what Josh Frost is doing. And then I know Evelyn Gahn with Wycliffe Global Alliance is also partnering with a lot of us organizations. She's taking the lead to make sure that we do add this competency, because it is a different kind of competency.
Yeah, and that's something, Austin. It's a good and timely question that a lot of people are asking at the same time. And so hopefully that's the Holy Spirit moving and inspiring people to explore it. Like Swapna said, at the same time, we have the initiative that's going to be happening in Johannesburg in September. That is multi-organizational. At least 9 different organizations have been involved in developing the curriculum, and yeah, so that's going to happen in September. And that one is more taking people who have an oral background and bringing them towards quality assurance for translation, OBT. The other one that she mentioned with Josh, so that it's taking people who have a written background and introducing them to oral checking and quality assurance. And one of the things that keeps coming up is that we need to recognize that consultant doesn't mean quality assurance checker who says, yes, this is it. And that's their only role. There's a lot more involved in training and bringing people with them instead of just saying,
Mhm.
yes, this is the right word that you used here, and now you can have my check of approval. But yeah, so that's that one. We're working on developing a 5 workshop series that covers 2 years, and it'll be cyclical so that we can keep doing that. The idea is that it will be reproducible and translatable so that we can do it in different parts of the world and in different languages of wider communication. Yeah, I think a lot of people are recognizing that this is something that needs to be done. It's not always sufficient that someone who has a written translation background can just automatically check oral. There may be instances of people like that. I'm not going to discount that possibility. But as my pastor used to say, God only worked in a vacuum once.
Chris, can I add something to this? I think all of the trainings are wonderful, and these are great ideas. I would just add to this as someone who's going through the CIT process, and it's very rigorous, and there's a priority on getting multiple experiences in mentor checking and written translation projects, no matter where you want to work. I think that in addition to all the training, right now this is the second time it's being recorded, so I think I'm going to be committed to this position. I think consultants who have worked in written translation or certified in written translation have only worked in written projects should have to complete mentor checking on OBT projects before they're qualified to work independently.
Okay. Thank you for adding that. That's good to know.
Raising the bar.
That's right. Well, guys, this has been excellent. I think that we're approaching the hour. Uh, Excellent conversation, excellent questions. Feel free to reach out to Robin and Swapna if you have burning questions that you weren't able to get out there quick enough. They are happy to, I'm volunteering them. They are happy to respond to any questions that you might have and suggestions that can make their research better. We're always trying to improve and learn. I think that everybody in this group does have a posture of wanting to learn and to make things better and to improve how we're doing this. It's not that we have the right answer, it's that we want to explore it together. So thank you for your time this week or this month. Just to let you know, I have a couple of announcements. Next month, the reading group will be reading Making Cognitive Insights on Memory Evident in OBT Projects by Fausto Liriano. So I'll be sending out the announcement and the article. If you have someone that might be interested in joining this reading group, please send them my way. I'd be happy to get them included. But something to think about. We're nearing the end of this article or this journal. We're going to need some more things to process together. So if you have something that you've been reading and you're thinking, "Ooh, I want to talk about this with the group," let me know so that we can try to get it onto the schedule. And if we need to get permission to be able to share it, we'll talk to the publishers. Yes, Tobias, do you want to mention that?
Yes, I just put in the chat that Acta Theologica, which is a South African open access journal, has a special edition coming out, I think in June, on OBT and I think community empowerment or development. Yeah. So I've got an article coming out about how OBT helps to preserve language as well. So there'll be some articles in that coming out soon.
Excellent. We'll definitely get those on the list. And others, if you think of those, feel free to to send them my way. Also, just a heads up, the multimodality COP meeting for May, Brian Harmelink will be sharing about multimodality and conversational exegesis. That's a working title. He's supposed to have me a title and description by tomorrow. So hopefully that'll come in and I'll send out the email announcing that. And he'll also be sharing in the Spanish COP the next day after that. So if you miss it in English, you can come to the next day in Spanish. Does anybody else have any announcements that you'd like to make before we end?